You wake choking on rot. The first assault is the stench, an unholy fermentation of awful fish guts and the collective exhalations of 10,000 unwashed bodies compressed into a single miasma that hangs over the city like a damp funeral shroud. It invades your nostrils with violent insistence, causing your stomach to heave in revolt. Your eyes water uncontrollably, lungs desperately reaching for the filtered, sanitized air of the 21st century that simply doesn't exist here. The absence of that taken-for-granted modern luxury hits with the force of physical withdrawal. Stone walls surround you, so close that you can taste the ancient mildew flourishing on their damp surfaces. The closeness is claustrophobic, an architectural vice grip that seems designed to squeeze the breath from modern lungs. Water, though calling this viscous gray slime water, feels like a profound linguistic betrayal, drips steadily from somewhere overhead. It drums against broken terracotta roof tiles with hypnotic irregularity, tapping out a lazy threat. Tick, tick, tetanus. Congratulations. A voice in your head groans with bitter applause that echoes through the hollow chambers of your skull. You made it to Rome. You haven't even opened your eyes properly, and you're already late for death. Your eyelids peel apart reluctantly, revealing a sliver of ancient world that immediately overwhelms your modern sensibilities. Colors seem wrong, too vivid in places, too muted in others, lacking the digital enhancement that your eyes have grown accustomed to. The light has a quality you've never experienced, unfiltered by atmosphere that hasn't yet been poisoned by industrialization, but thickened by wood smoke and human density. The alley you've materialized in is barely wide enough for a single person to navigate, walls leaning inward, as if conspiring to collapse upon you. Centuries of human touch have worn the stone smooth in places, while others remain jagged enough to tear flesh with casual indifference. The ground beneath your feet is damp with substances you dare not contemplate. You try to stand. The movement sends shards of pain shooting through joints, unaccustomed to such primitive terrain. The alley answers your attempt with a sickening crunch. Mouse bones beneath your sandal. A discarded piece of pottery. No, that crunch came from inside you. Your knees weren't designed for 2 millennia-old cobblestones, and your modern posture makes you a biological anachronism in this circus of uneven basalt blocks and treacherous footing. You stagger forward, disoriented by the alien geometry of ancient urban planning, and instantly earn a shoulder check from a mule dragging a wagon of amphora. The impact nearly sends you sprawling. The ceramic vessels leak, garum, fish sauce marinated in the apathy of forgotten gods, creating a slick that threatens what little balance you've managed to achieve. The mule's iron-shod hoof nearly kisses your foot in a dance of near dismemberment. A close call. The most disorienting part. Nobody, literally nobody cares. The driver doesn't even glance in your direction. The mule can't be bothered to acknowledge almost crippling you. The crowd flowing past simply moves around you like smoke circling a tombstone. You are simultaneously in the center of human civilization and utterly, completely invisible. Welcome to the beating heart of an empire that never asked for your vital signs. You inhale again, mistake, and taste, lead. The metallic flavor coats your tongue with an insidious sweetness that belies its toxicity. Every aqueduct pipe, every public fountain, every jug in every insula is lined with this soft, poisonous metal that sweetens the water just enough to pickle your brain cells one sip at a time. You can almost feel the alchemy happening behind your eyes, thoughts turning sluggish, memories misfiring, mood darkening into the same murky gray as the Tiber that flows through the city's heart. Lead poisoning is a patient assassin, and you've unwittingly swallowed the invitation to your own neurological undoing. The sky above is a narrow strip of blue between leaning buildings, buildings stacked precariously upon each other in defiance of all architectural prudence. Laundry lines crisscross this sliver of heaven, laden with tunics and loincloths of varying degrees of cleanliness. A woman shakes out a blanket from a third-story window, releasing a cloud of fleas and dust that drifts down like toxic snow. You step back instinctively, colliding with a man carrying a basket of eels, still writhing with stubborn life. He curses you in a dialect so ancient that scholars in your time would pay fortunes to hear it, and you've just earned it for free, along with a shower of fish slime and contempt. A hawker shrieks inches from your ear, his voice pitched to cut through the ambient chaos of the Roman streets. Pulse, pulse fumante, hot barley porridge. He's missing his front teeth. Scurvy claimed them last winter, leaving behind a gaping reminder of vitamin deficiency. The porridge bubbles in a blackened pot, offering you a living museum of parasites swimming in grain. Your stomach, courageously ignorant of the danger, actually growls in response. But appetite must wait. Breakfast in Rome is rationed behind a paywall called sesterti, and your credit card is about 800 years too flimsy for Roman capitalism. Something warm splatters your arm without warning. For a fraction of a second, you hope it's rain, a simple meteorological event. It's not. An upstairs resident has just emptied a chamber pot out the window, following the ancient Roman waste management philosophy of out of sight, out of domus. The contents glisten on your sleeve, steaming gently in the morning air, shifting through colors you've only seen in fever dreams and questionable cafeteria offerings. A baby starts wailing somewhere above. You can't identify which window. Every opening in these tenements looks like a mouth swallowing its own screams of despair. You need relief. You need space. You need, absurdly, silence. Forget it. Rome is an orchestra tuned to chaos, playing a symphony of human existence at maximum volume, without intermission. Iron-shod wagon wheels screech against paving stones with the musical quality of tortured metal. Smithies ring anvils in polyrhythmic patterns that would inspire avant-garde percussionists. Vendors bark their wares in a dozen accents, from Celtic lilt to Syrian cadence. Philosophers debate metaphysics outside temples with passionate intensity. An endless chorus of dogs barks at all of them, asserting their own importance in the urban ecosystem. It's not a city, it's tinnitus given architectural form, a perpetual assault on senses trained for the relative quiet of noise-cancelling headphones and soundproofed apartments. The sun climbs higher in the sky, and with it rises the smell of the Cloaca Maxima, the great sewer, a sewer so significant, so monumentally important to Roman infrastructure that it requires a title of imperial gravitas. You catch a glimpse of the waterway through a gap between buildings, a sluggish artery of filth oozing beneath ornate bridges, carrying Rome's collective sins out to sea. Except it doesn't carry them far enough. The breeze keeps returning the bouquet with sadistic regularity. You consider holding your breath for the rest of the day. By nightfall you'd look fashionably cyanotic, perhaps starting a new trend among the Roman elite. You push your way through the crowd, learning quickly that concepts of personal space are as foreign to ancient Rome as smartphones. Bodies press against you from all directions, some clean by ancient standards, meaning they've bathed this month, others radiating the distinctive perfume of chronic unwash. A woman with a basket balanced on her head brushes past, her arms stained purple to the elbows from working in the dye vats. The color will never wash out. She'll carry the mark of her profession to her grave, fingers permanently stained the color of royalty that she herself will never wear. Children dart between adults' legs, like schools of human fish, playing games whose rules are incomprehensible to you, but seem to involve much shouting and occasional violence. One boy, no more than 7, carries a live chicken upside down, the bird's protests adding to the cacophony. Another child follows closely, a knife that looks too large for his small hands clutched in anticipation of dinner. You think about bathing. The idea forms in your mind like a desert mirage, clean water, soap, privacy, delightful fantasy. Public baths shimmer in the distance, marble palaces of steam and gossip that stand as monuments to Roman hygiene. But to get clean in ancient Rome means sharing water with 3,000 strangers, at least half afflicted with skin maladies that would send modern dermatologists into anaphylactic shock. The strigil curved metal scraper used to peel sweat and dirt from oiled skin travels from back to back in a communal gesture of exfoliation and bacterial exchange. Ancient Rome's idea of sanitization involves the principle that volume of water eventually dilutes all impurities. Lather up, past the plague. A centurion strides past, his armor glinting in the sunlight, red crest on his helmet marking him as a man of authority. His face bears the weathered look of campaigns in distant lands, Germania perhaps, or the valleys of Hispania. His eyes scan the crowd with professional detachment, seeing not people but potential threats, tax evaders, or troublemakers. At his hip swings a gladius, the short sword designed for stabbing in close quarters, its leather-wrapped handle worn smooth by years of use. He doesn't look at you, you're beneath notice, but you instinctively step aside. Even in your historical ignorance, you recognize power when it walks by wearing metal and purpose. Someone jostles you from behind. Their toga brush is softer than you imagined, almost luxurious against your skin, but the perfume seeping from the fabric's folds is a complex bouquet of anise, rancid animal fat, and social ambition. He's wealthy. You can tell because he's alive without visible injuries. His teeth remain in his head past the age of 30, and a slave clears his path with practiced efficiency. The slave meets your eyes for half a heartbeat, quick, apologetic, resigned, and you see a mirror of your own fear tinted by lifelong captivity. The chain at his ankle clinks like punctuation at the end of every step. If privilege has a soundtrack in ancient Rome, it's the respectful hush that follows that chain. Common citizens step aside, not for the slave, but for the senator whose importance he heralds. The senator's face is a study in contradictions. Jowls softened by excessive banqueting hang below eyes hardened by political survival. He wears his toga with the practiced ease of one born to it, the complex drapery of citizenship that would take you hours to properly arrange, sitting perfectly on his shoulders. A signet ring glints on his finger, its carved stone worth more than most Romans will earn in a decade. He passes by in a cloud of entitlement and rosewater, leaving you choking on both. You drift with the human current toward the forum, that stone-paved mouth where every rumor becomes law, and every law becomes rumor before sundown. The crowd thickens as you approach, bodies pressing closer together in anticipation of the day's political theater. Marble columns loom overhead, chipped by time yet defiant, casting shade as thin and selective as imperial mercy. Statues of dead conquerors leer from pedestals, marble pupils tracking you with permanent smugness that transcends death and historical relevance. You want to ask them, was the glory worth it? Did the marble outlast the meaning? But stone isn't generous with answers to philosophical questions. The forum opens before you, like an architectural exhalation. Suddenly the pressing claustrophobia of the narrow streets gives way to planned open space dominated by temples, basilicas, monuments, to vanity disguised as civic virtue. Here lies the beating heart of an empire that controls everything from the foggy shores of Britannia to the sun-scorched deserts of Judea. Decisions made on these steps will determine the fates of millions who will never set foot in Rome, whose names will never grace a Senate roll, but whose blood and labor fuel the machine of expansion. A crier mounts a rostrum, scroll in hand, his lungs clearly trained for projection in the days before amplification. He unfurls a new edict with the flourish of one who enjoys being the first voice of power. The crowd quiets, not out of respect, but out of practical necessity. Information in Rome is currency, and currency means survival. By decree of the Senate and order of the Emperor, he begins, voice rolling across the forum, like well-oiled thunder. The grain dole shall be adjusted for the month of Quintilis to 3 modii per citizen. Murmurs ripple through the crowd. Is this an increase or decrease from last month? The mathematics of starvation are calculated in real time on the faces around you. Furthermore, the crier continues, in celebration of the emperor's triumph over the rebellious tribes of Pannonia, extraordinary games shall commence at the Flavian Amphitheatre in 3 days' time, featuring 100 pairs of gladiators, a naval battle, and beasts from the furthest reaches of the empire. The crowd roars approval, a wave of sound that nearly knocks you physically backward. You catch fragments of excited conversation around you. Nubian lions, Caledonian bears, Germanic prisoners, the empire's reach, displayed in a menagerie of the exotic and doomed. You swallow the taste of dust and moral jealousy. Exotic beasts, mean lions, tigers, elephants, maybe an unlucky rhino torn from its habitat and shipped across the Mediterranean in conditions that would horrify modern animal rights activists. They'll travel from Africa and Asia in ship holds that stink like rotting wood and spilled blood, only to die for a moment's applause and the greater glory of an emperor they'll never see. Gladiators, war prisoners, criminals, debtors, volunteers drunk on the currency of fame will splash the sand with arterial artistry choreographed to look spontaneous. You will watch because everyone watches. The Colosseum is Rome's television, its social media and virtual reality combined, and the remote control is stuck on one channel. Carnage as entertainment, death as social glue. A hand tugs your tunic with gentle insistence. You spin, defensive instincts flaring. A pickpocket, a beggar, a child, barefoot, ribs, counting themselves in visible procession, under skin drawn tight, across malnutrition, whispers, please, Dominus, a scrap. His eyes are older than your entire future, holding a wisdom born of sustained deprivation. You check your pockets reflexively, one coin you lifted from a drunken soldier, earlier surprising yourself with this newly discovered talent for survival, your only lifeline, sings like a siren of temptation. Give it away, starve tonight, keep it, watch him starve sooner. This is Rome's favorite moral puzzle. Compassion priced at more than you can comfortably afford. Ethical calculations performed on an abacus of hunger. The boy's hand remains extended, neither demanding nor retreating, simply stating a need as undeniable as gravity. His fingernails are black with dirt, knuckles scraped from fights or falls, or both. A sore festers at the corner of his mouth, the beginning stages of some deficiency that modern medicine would cure with a simple supplement. In this time, it's just another path to an early grave. What's your name? You hear yourself ask, the Latin words feeling strange on your tongue, as if your mouth is speaking from ancestral memory rather than conscious knowledge. Tertius, he answers, voice soft but not timid. Third son, not a name of distinction, but a numerical designation in a family where children might not survive to adulthood. You hesitate, coin burning a hole in your conscience before letting practicality win over immediate compassion. You shake your head, mutter another time, and keep walking, knowing the promise is likely empty. The child's footsteps fade behind you, absorbed into the general noise of Rome like a single raindrop in an ocean. Somewhere a poet would make eloquent metaphors about innocence, sacrificed on the altar of empire's hunger. But Rome doesn't need poetry. It writes tragedies in real time on human skin, using blood as ink and necessity as muse. Midday arrives with vengeful intensity. The heat becomes physical, a thick woolen robe you can't remove, pressing against skin already sticky with sweat and city grime. The stone buildings radiate the sun's energy back at street level, creating an oven effect that has driven the wealthiest citizens to their countryside villas for the worst of summer. Those left behind, shopkeepers, slaves, artisans, beggars, seek whatever shade they can find. Shade stalls appear like mirages along the street edges, awnings dyed purple, red, saffron, colors forced from crushed mollusks, ground beetles, and exotic plants from Egypt. Under these fabric oases, vendors sell snow imported from distant mountains at astronomical prices, packed in straw and cloth, flavored with honey or fruit essences. You want a cup desperately, your modern body unaccustomed to heat without air conditioning's intervention, but again, Cisterti remain the uncrossable barrier between desire and fulfillment. You settle instead for a gulp of lukewarm posca, vinegar water sold to legionnaires and those pretending to possess their hardiness. It scours your throat like liquid criticism and leaves an aftertaste of surrender mixed with preservative tang. The streets have their own social geography that you're slowly beginning to decode. The wider avenues belong to the wealthy, the narrow alleys to the poor. Certain corners host specific professions. Here a cluster of scribes with portable writing desks offer their literacy to the illiterate majority. There a row of fortune tellers interpret dreams and entrails for the spiritually uncertain. Money changers sit at small tables, scales at the ready, checking coins for authenticity with suspicious eyes and teeth marks. Every stranger is a potential fraud in a city built on competitive advantage. You wander toward the Subura, Rome's infamous slum district, where wooden balconies lean like drunks over alleys too narrow for sunlight to fully penetrate. Here the air turns thick, with incense smoking from makeshift shrines, cooking oil reused until it's nearly solid, and the sick sweet odor of bodies packed 7 stories high in flammable timber apartments. Fire is the constant fear here. One spark, one untended cooking flame, one carelessly placed oil lamp, and the night sky becomes a furnace with human kindling. Fire brigades exist, yes, privately owned by a wealthy senator who delights in buying burning buildings at a discount from desperate owners before extinguishing the flames. Disaster capitalism, not a modern invention after all, but an ancient practice perfected through opportunistic evolution. You duck under laundry lines sagging with tunics in various states of cleanliness, dodge a trickle of mystery fluid leaking from upstairs latrines, and nearly collide with a funeral procession slowly making its way along the narrow street. 4 men carry a simple wooden bier on their shoulders, the body wrapped in once white cloths, now yellowed with age, and economy. Behind them walks a woman, wife, daughter, sister, her hair deliberately disheveled according to mourning custom, face streaked with tears that cut clean trails through the dirt of poverty. No wax masks for this funeral, no professional mourners, no elaborate procession of ancestors represented by actors wearing death masks of the family's distinguished dead. This is death on a budget, grief constrained by financial reality. The dead man's journey to the afterlife will be as sparsely equipped as his life was in this world. You step aside, lower your eyes in respect universal to all human cultures, and feel the brush of mortality against your sleeve as they pass. The procession turns toward the city gates. Burial must take place outside the sacred boundary of the pomerium, where the ritually unclean presence of corpses won't offend gods or citizens with delicate sensibilities. You watch them go, a humble reminder that regardless of time period or social station, the final journey awaits all. The afternoon brings drums, a military parade, a religious procession. No, it's debt collectors, making their rounds with official backing and rehearsed intimidation. They parade through the streets like predators seeking vulnerable prey. Parchment contracts roll tightly in fists like small clubs of bureaucratic violence. In ancient Rome, missing a payment doesn't result in a politely worded letter or damaged credit score. It cascades rapidly toward loss of property, freedom, and potentially life itself. They spot a citizen trying to flee down a side alley, a middle-aged man whose tunic has seen better decades, face lined with a particular anxiety of financial desperation. Chase ensues, swift and practiced. You step aside as four collectors tackle him into a heap of pig manure left by a passing livestock transport. The crowd forms a circle, not interfering but not leaving either. Public humiliation serves as both entertainment and warning in Rome's economic ecosystem. Gaius Hostilius, one collector reads from his scroll with bureaucratic precision for failure to repay the sum of 50 denarii plus interest to the noble Lucius Caecilius. You are hereby claimed as property until such debt is satisfied. They bind his hands with practiced efficiency, reciting charges in formal Latin that sounds almost musical in its legal rhythms. Default, negligence, insolence, then drag him toward the Tullianum, Rome's infamous underground prison carved into the Capitoline hillside. He'll wait there, in darkness, pierced only by meager light from air shafts and the occasional torch, probably until his family sells everything they own or themselves into servitude to free him. If he has no family, he'll simply vanish into the darkness, another skeleton for future archaeologists to label, unknown individual, presumed debtor. Your conscience whispers, help. Your survival instinct screams, silence. In this moment of moral paralysis, you choose silence. Rome rewards spectators, not heroes who intervene in the machinery of its social order. You watch the man disappear around a corner, his eyes briefly meeting yours with neither accusation nor hope, just the flat acceptance of fate that seems to be Rome's most common expression. Hunger returns, gnawing at your stomach with increasing insistence. You sniff the air and follow the scent of baking bread to a thermopolium, a street-side fast food shop where busy Romans grab quick meals. Steam rises from terracotta pots sunk into a marble counter stained by decades of grease and spills. The proprietor, a heavily jowled man with forearms scarred from years of oven burns, assesses your financial status with a single glance. "What can you afford, friend?" he asks, the word friend containing no actual friendship, but serving as commercial lubricant. You invest your solitary coin in a bowl of lentils swimming in olive oil with suspicious flecks of meat floating like tiny islands of mystery protein. Rat? Dog? Exotic beast, rejected from amphitheater rehearsal for insufficient ferocity? You chew and pretend not to notice the occasional crunch, maybe gravel from poor washing, maybe bone fragments from careless butchery. At least it's warm, and the oil provides calories your body desperately needs for this unexpected historical marathon. Standing at the counter, you observe your fellow diners, a cross-section of Roman working class, grabbing sustenance between labors, a carpenter with sawdust, still clinging to his beard, gulps down a portion of fish stew, bones and all. Two prostitutes from the brothel down the street share a single portion of chickpeas, carefully counting out exactly equal numbers on their wax tablet. A messenger boy, legs muscled from endless running through the city's hills, devours bread dipped in olive oil with the focused intensity of youth, stoking a growing body. First time in Rome? The thermopolium owner asks, wiping his hands on a cloth that might once have been white centuries ago. You nod, mouth full of lentils. Thought so. You have that look, like someone hit you with a building. He laughs, the sound like stones rolling downhill. You'll either be dead by next week, or become Roman enough to survive. There's not much middle ground in this city. You swallow hard, both food and truth, difficult to digest. Any advice? He leans closer, voice dropping. Don't drink the water unless it's boiled or mixed with wine. Don't look wealthy legionaries in the eye. Don't sleep near the Tiber unless you want to wake up with rats exploring your ears. And most importantly, he pauses, checking that no one is listening too closely. Don't trust anyone who says they want to help you without naming their price first. Nothing in Rome is free, especially kindness. With that cheerful counsel delivered, he turns to his next customer, and you're dismissed from his attention as completely as if you'd suddenly vanished. You scrape the last of the lentils from the bowl with a piece of bread, savoring the simple pleasure of a momentarily quieted stomach. A commotion draws you toward the Via Sacra, the sacred way, Rome's most important street that cuts through the Forum toward the Palatine Hill. A detachment of soldiers marches in perfect lockstep, armor glinting in the afternoon sun like freshly sharpened insults aimed at mortality. Their faces tell individual stories beneath the collective discipline. Sunburned, scar-stitched, and professionally bored, they've seen Germanic spear walls bristling like angry porcupines, faced Parthian horse archers whose arrows blocked the sun, survived betrayal by imperial paymasters who reduced their stipends when the treasury ran low. Today's assignment is simpler, almost mundane in its routine cruelty. Crucifixion detail. 3 condemned men stumble behind the soldiers, stripped to loincloths that barely preserve modesty while maximizing humiliation. Each carries the horizontal beam of his own cross, the patibulum, across shoulders already striped with preliminary flogging marks. The vertical posts will be waiting at the execution grounds, permanent installations of Roman justice's efficiency. One prisoner collapses under the weight of his beam, knees striking stone with a crack that makes you wince. He earns a lash that threads open his back like a shredded scroll, muscle gleaming wetly beneath parted skin. You flinch involuntarily. The crowd around you yawns collectively. Public torture in Rome is less entertainment than ambient background, like elevator music in a particularly sadistic department store. Tax evaders, a voice explains beside you. You turn to find an old man with a philosopher's beard and the shrewd eyes of a professional observer. Collected tolls on the Appian Way, and kept half for themselves. Poor planning, really. Should have chosen a route less traveled if they wanted to avoid imperial auditors. The soldiers and their burden disappear beyond a monumental arch, but their ultimate destination is written in the architecture of suffering that Rome has perfected, a hilltop outside the city walls, where examples are made and imperial authority is reinforced one agonizing death at a time. By sunset, gossip will flutter through wine shops and bathhouses about how long each victim lasted before the final rattle, whether they died with dignity or begged for mercy. If family members attempted to end the suffering prematurely with bribes to the guards for a coup de grace, you will pretend not to listen. When these conversations reach your ears, you will listen anyway, human curiosity overriding moral discomfort. The philosopher still stands beside you, studying your reaction with clinical interest. "You're not from here," he states rather than asks. "Your disgust is too fresh, too unweathered by exposure." "Is it that obvious?" you ask, wondering if your modern sensibilities are as visible as a neon sign in this ancient setting. To those who pay attention, he shrugs. Most Romans don't notice anything beyond their immediate concerns. It's what makes the empire both powerful and vulnerable, collective self-absorption, interrupted by occasional genius. He introduces himself as Apollonius, a Greek by birth, but Roman by circumstance, a teacher of rhetoric who wanders the forum collecting human stories the way others collect coins or art. You give him a name, any name, it doesn't matter, and he accepts it with a nod that suggests he knows it's fabricated, but appreciates the game. Camille says, gesturing toward a small popiner, a wine shop with a few rough tables, "Let me buy you a cup, and tell you how to survive longer than the average visitor." Suspicion wars with a basic human need for connection. You follow, because in this alien world, any guide seems better than continued aimless wandering. The wine shop is dark, cool, a cave of relative sensory relief after the assault of the streets. Amphoria line the walls, their pointed bottoms nestled in sand-filled niches. The proprietor greets Apollonius with familiar respect, bringing cups without being asked. The wine is nothing like what you've tasted before, strong, almost vinegary, mixed with water that you pray has been boiled. Apollonius drinks without hesitation, and you follow suit, feeling the warmth spread through your empty stomach like liquid courage. "First rule," he begins, "not wasting time on pleasantries. Walk like you have urgent business with the emperor himself. Purpose deters predators, human and otherwise. Second," he continues, counting on gnarled fingers, "carry a small knife if you can afford one, but never draw it unless you're prepared to use it fatally and immediately. Hesitation in violence is an invitation to become its victim. Third, learn which neighborhoods change character after dark. The Suburra is never safe, but sections near the Campus Martius become hunting grounds after sunset." He leans closer. "In never, under any circumstances, trust the vigils at night. Rome's watchmen are underpaid and over-suspicious. They're as likely to arrest you for being in the wrong place as they are to protect you from actual criminals." The lesson continues, a crash course in urban survival across time, until the wine is gone and the sun has shifted position. Apollonius rises, leaving coins on the table without counting them, either generosity or calculated indifference to small sums. "My final advice," he says, as parting wisdom, "find something to love about this cesspool of a city. Those who hate Rome die quickly. Those who love it despite its flaws sometimes live long enough to become part of its endless story." He disappears into the street crowd with surprising agility for his age, leaving you with a head slightly fuzzy from wine and a mental catalogue of survival strategies that might keep you alive until tomorrow. It's not a long-term plan, but in Rome, tomorrow often counts as long-term thinking. The sun begins its descent toward the western hills, shadows stretching like lazy predators pawing at victims too tired to run. The day's heat lingers in stone and humanity, but the edge of its oppression has dulled slightly. You push toward the Circus Maximus, drawn by thunderous cheering that pulses through the city like a collective heartbeat. The circus appears suddenly as you crest a small hill, a massive elongated arena nestled between the Palatine and Aventine hills, designed specifically for the oldest and most beloved entertainment in Rome, chariot racing. The scale is breathtaking. This is the largest sporting arena the ancient world will ever know, capable of holding 250,000 spectators in its curved embrace. From your elevated position, you can see the entire circuit, the long straight stretches connected by dangerously tight turns, the central spina, the median strip, lined with marble obelisks, statues, and lap-counting devices shaped like eggs and dolphins. 4 factions dominate Roman chariot racing, each with fanatical supporters: the reds, the whites, the blues, and the greens. Their colors flash like battle standards throughout the crowd, worn as ribbons, scarves, or painted directly on exposed skin. You pick a color at random: blue, because the cheering feels lonely without allegiance, and the need to belong transcends historical periods with universal human insistence. You find a standing spot at the upper level, squeezed between a merchant with garlic breath and a family whose children keep climbing you like human scaffolding for a better view. The merchant notices your faction choice and grunts approval. Apparently he's also a blues supporter, which instantly transforms you from stranger to conditional ally in the tribal mathematics of sports fandom. The tension in the air is palpable as teams line up at the starting gates. Each chariot is deceptively fragile, a lightweight construction of wood, leather, and wicker designed for speed rather than safety. The drivers, wrapped in the colors of their factions, stand with loose reins wound around their waists, a technique that gives them better control, but ensures that if they're thrown from the chariot, they'll be dragged behind panicked horses until death or dismemberment releases them. Trumpets blare, the white cloth drops, gates crash open, horses explode from the carceries, starting gates like living projectiles, hooves carving the track's surface into clay bullets that pelt spectators in the lower rows. The sound is overwhelming: thundering hooves, creaking leather, shouting drivers, and the roar of the crowd rising in a crescendo that physically vibrates through your body. The chariots bunch together, heading into the first turn, wheels nearly touching, drivers wielding whips that cut air, and occasionally opponents with equal precision. The man next to you screams, incomprehensibly, spittle flying, veins bulging in his neck as if they might burst. The children have abandoned your shoulders in favor of jumping up and down, creating a miniature earthquake on the wooden stands. Everyone around you has transformed from individual humans into a collective organism of competitive emotion. The first lap passes in a blur of dust and color. The blues hold third position. The whites lead, followed closely by the greens. The reds struggle at the back after a poor start. 7 laps remain, each circuit of the arena bringing new strategic shifts and potential disaster. On the third lap, catastrophe strikes with spectacular violence. A green chariot attempts to pass on the inside, approaching the turn, misjudges the space available, and clips the wheel of the white leader. The effect is immediate and devastating. The white chariot's axle snaps with a crack, audible even over the crowd's roar. The vehicle flips, catapulting its driver through the air like a rag doll. He cartwheels, in horrifying silence, before his helmet meets the stone base of a spina statue with terminal force. The white horses, now dragging splintered remains, veer into the path of the reds, causing a secondary collision that sends another driver tumbling across the track. The crowd's reaction is instantaneous and morally confusing to your modern sensibilities, an eruption of excited glee at the spectacular destruction, mixed with factional disappointment or celebration depending on team allegiance. The man beside you bellows with delight. The white's misfortune improves the blue's position to second place. The children jump higher, trying to see the broken bodies being hastily dragged off the track by arena slaves. Your heart sprints faster than the surviving teams, a combination of adrenaline and ethical vertigo. You taste metal on your tongue, fear or excitement. Rome has already taught you their synonyms in this culture of stylized violence. The race continues as if nothing has happened. Death is merely a production cost in the economy of entertainment. The green leader, having caused the crash without suffering consequences, now battles the blue chariot for first position. They thunder down the straight stretch, teams of 4 horses at full gallop, drivers leaning forward as if their posture might add crucial speed. The blue driver is skilled, handling his reins with the precision of a surgeon, anticipating the movements of his team with almost supernatural connection. As they approach the far turn, he makes his move, cutting inside with just enough clearance to avoid disaster, taking the shorter line through the curve, emerging ahead by a chariot length. The final lap becomes a duel between blue and green, their supporters screaming with such intensity that you fear for the structural integrity of the stands beneath you. The merchant clutches your arm with painful force, his fingernails digging crescents into your skin that you'll discover hours later. The children have stopped jumping and stand frozen in anticipation. The chariots thunder toward the finish, dust billowing behind them like the wake of ancient ships. The blue team maintains its slim lead, horses lathered with sweat, nostrils flared to bloody rawness. The green driver makes one final, desperate attempt to overtake, shifting weight dangerously to the side of his chariot. His vehicle tilts, balances on 2 wheels for a heart-stopping moment, then crashes back to 4 with a jolt that nearly unseats him. That mistake costs him the crucial distance needed for victory. Blue wins. The stands erupt in sectional joy and despair. Blue supporters leap, embrace strangers, weep with unrestrained emotion. Green fans howl in outrage, some hurling objects toward the track in frustrated disappointment. Red and white adherents, their hopes already dashed by crashes, begin filtering toward exits with the universal body language of sports fans planning to drown sorrows in alcohol and revisionist analysis of what went wrong. You cheer with the merchant and his newfound brothers in blue allegiance, arms raised like you've known them your entire life. For a heartbeat, you are Roman, violent, ecstatic, tribal. The experience is intoxicating. Belonging transcends time, historical context, moral frameworks. You understand, in this moment of collective celebration, how the empire maintains coherence across vast geographical and cultural differences. Rome has mastered the social technology of shared spectacle as political binding agent. Then the sun touches the horizon, shadows grow long across the emptying circus, and reality collects its dues. The spell breaks. You remember your alienation, your temporal displacement, your fundamental otherness in this ancient world that has momentarily embraced you as one of its own. Night in Rome is not a lullaby, it's an ambush with multiple accomplices. Darkness falls with surprising swiftness, the transition from day to night, lacking the gradual softening provided by electric illumination. Torches flicker to life along major thoroughfares, throwing monster silhouettes across walls and transforming familiar faces into grotesque masks. Oil lamps appear in windows like earthbound stars, their light too feeble to properly illuminate, but just bright enough to create disorienting pools of visibility, surrounded by impenetrable shadow. You drift away from the circus with the dispersing crowd, following the human current without clear destination. Wine shops brim with sailors, fresh from Ostia, Rome's port city, their idea of diplomatic relations with the local population being a broken amphora to the face of anyone who questions their right to celebrate shore leave at maximum volume. Their language is a polyglot stew of Latin mixed with Greek, Egyptian, Syrian, and half a dozen other tongues from ports around the Mediterranean, creating a linguistic barrier as effective as their muscled arms at keeping others at a distance. Prostitutes emerge, like nocturnal flowers, opening for business, positioning themselves near taverns and bathhouses, where potential clients are most likely to have both means and diminished judgment. They whisper promises you can't afford in Latin, Greek, and the universal language of commercial sexuality. Their pimps lurk behind columns, counting potential profits and calculating the violence necessary to ensure them. You hug the street edge, scanning shadows for the metallic glint of daggers or the sudden movement that precedes assault. The vigiles, Rome's combination night watchmen and firefighters, patrol in pairs, carrying staffs and small oil lamps that would be comically inadequate in any modern police force. They're supposedly responsible for maintaining order after dark, but they're fewer than the city's thieves, and more interested in collecting bribes than dispensing justice. You watch one pair stop a wealthy-looking citizen, examine his documents with exaggerated care, then allow him to proceed after coins change hands with practiced subtlety. You clutch your empty purse like it's a protective talisman, trying to project the appearance of poverty too complete to be worth robbing. The temperature drops with surprising speed, the day's oppressive heat surrendering to a chilly dampness that rises from the Tiber and seeps through the thin fabric of your tunic. You shiver, suddenly understanding why Roman clothing often included layers of wool, even in what seemed like warm weather. The stone that absorbs solar energy all day now releases its stored heat too slowly to combat the night's encroaching cold. You need shelter. Cheap lodging lies in the insulae, towering apartment blocks, stitched together by wishful thinking and architectural optimism. These vertical slums house the majority of Rome's population, stacked like human storage containers, with the poorest residents occupying the uppermost floors most vulnerable to fire, collapse, and weather. You approach a building that looks marginally less likely to collapse overnight than its neighbors. The ground floor houses shops now closed for the night, their wooden shutters securely barred against thieves. A narrow staircase leads upward, the steps worn into shallow depressions by generations of feet. The smell intensifies as you climb, a concentrate of cooking odors, human waste, unwashed bodies, and the peculiar fungal scent of perpetual dampness. Voices filter through thin walls, arguments, lovemaking, children crying, a man coughing with the wet persistence that suggests tuberculosis. On the third floor, you knock at a door selected at random. After a suspicious pause, it opens to reveal a woman whose face tells the story of hard living with economic brevity. She evaluates you with a single glance, measuring your worth and threat potential. What? The question contains no welcome. Looking for lodging, you explain, holding up your remaining coins, payment more convincing than words. She considers, then nods tersely. 1 night. corner space. She takes the money without counting it. She knows exactly what you've shown, and steps aside. The apartment is a single room, occupied by what appears to be a family of 6. The woman, a man presumably her husband, 3 children of descending size, and an elderly person of indeterminate gender, curled on a pallet near the small hearth. Your corner space is literally that, a triangular area where 2 walls meet, currently unoccupied by humans or furniture. Your mattress will be straw gathered from a pile and fluffed with your own hands. Your pillow, whatever bundle of clothing you can spare. Your roof, the tiles parted, wide enough to let in starlight and tomorrow's rain. But it's a roof. You arrange your minimal bedding, bones humming with the accumulated exhaustion of surviving a day in ancient Rome. Your stomach continues its percussion performance, the lentils from hours ago, having long since been metabolized into energy needed for constant vigilance. The family observes you with minimal interest. You are not the first stranger to rent their corner, nor will you be the last. The economics of survival in Rome demands maximizing every resource, including unused floor space. The children stare with the unfiltered curiosity of youth until their mother hisses a command that sends them to their own sleeping area, a raised platform that all 3 share with casual intimacy. "Where are you from?" the man asks, as he mends a sandal by oil lamplight, his fingers moving with practiced precision despite the poor illumination. You hesitate, calculating the safest answer. "North." He nods, as if this explains everything and requires no elaboration. "Looking for work?" "Yes. Try the warehouses by the river at dawn. They always need strong backs to unload ships. Pay is poor but immediate." He offers this information not from kindness, but from the pragmatic assessment that a renter who finds employment might become a regular source of income. The conversation ends as abruptly as it began. The family completes their evening routines around you, as if you were furniture. The children are settled. A simple meal of bread and olive oil is consumed in economic silence. Prayers are muttered to household gods, whose small shrine occupies the only decorative space in the room. The lamp is extinguished to save precious oil, plunging the apartment into darkness, pierced only by the faint glow of banked coals in the hearth. Above you, neighbors continue their argument, voices rising and falling in rhythmic conflict. Below, tavern patrons howl a drunken hymn to Bacchus, the god of wine, surely pleased by their enthusiastic, if tuneless devotion. Somewhere in the building, a dog dies with a final yelp that makes your skin prickle. Somewhere else, a baby begins life with the same sound, the circle of existence turning without ceremony. Heat lingers near the ceiling, while drafts explore the floor. Your skin sticks to straw in some places, while chilling in others. Fleas commence their nightly banquet, finding your foreign blood exotic and apparently delicious. You close your eyes, but the city presses its palm over your face, forces memories of the day into your skull like unwanted prophetic visions. The boy Tertius's hollow plea, the slave's apologetic glance, the crucified man's exposed musculature, the charioteer's fatal impact, the lion you imagine waiting in a cage beneath the Colosseum for its debut performance. Sleep, that fragile truce between human consciousness and physical torment, teeters on the edge of possibility. You count blessings. The list is distressingly short. You count breaths. They seem too loud in the darkness. You consider tomorrow and quickly redirect your thoughts to less anxiety-inducing subjects. Yet, as your consciousness drifts in the liminal space between wakefulness and sleep, something stirs within you, a tremor of unexpected awe. Beneath the grime, the cruelty, the lead-laced arrogance of empire, Rome pulses with raw creative energy that transcends its moral failings. Roads spider across continents from Britannia to Mesopotamia, carrying ideas faster than plagues can follow them. Languages intertwine in markets and forums, creating hybrid forms of communication that evolve with each transaction. Gods swap temples and attributes, like celestial travelers exchanging business cards. Science and engineering scribble drafts of future possibilities in the margins of what humans previously thought possible. You, an accidental chronological refugee, witness the empire mid-sentence, not yet aware of the barbarian footnote approaching from the historical future. The enormity of your situation suffocates and seduces in equal measure. You are breathing the same air as people whose lives will be interpreted and reinterpreted by scholars for millennia to come, experiencing directly what historians will forever theorize about through fragmentary evidence. Your heart slows gradually. The city's roar diminishes to a dull vibration, like a hive murmuring itself to sleep after a productive day of both creation and destruction. In this momentary lull between chaos and renewal, you almost believe you'll survive until dawn. Because dawn in Rome wakes hungry for new sacrifices to the eternal machinery of empire, and you are merely one more potential offering among thousands. The rooster's cry doesn't simply announce morning, it assaults consciousness with avian violence. You jerk upright, disoriented by unfamiliar surroundings, and smack your skull against a low wooden beam. Splinters rain down like miniature spears. Pain blossoms behind your eyes, vision temporarily starred with bright flashes. The family in whose apartment you've spent the night is already moving with the practiced efficiency of those for whom each day represents another battle in the ongoing war against destitution. Or before midday, the woman reminds you, not unkindly, but with the firmness of established transaction, your rental agreement expired with sunrise. First errand of your second day in ancient Rome, fetch water. You join a line at the nearest public fountain, an experience that provides an immediate crash course in social dynamics. Women form the majority of water gatherers, creating a temporary female community where gossip flows as freely as the water they collect. Children dart between adults, splashing each other and earning half-hearted scolding. Goats brought for watering contribute their own opinions through periodic bleating, while relieving themselves with casual disregard for human foot placement. You edge forward in line, listening to rapid Latin conversations that dart between topics with hummingbird quickness. Someone's daughter married above her station. The price of garum increased again at the corner shop. The senators are voting on a new tax that will surely bleed the plebeians dry. Jupiter's temple needs repairs after lightning struck ironically close to his own statue. The man ahead of you reaches the fountain, plunges his amphora into the basin, casually scoops aside a dead rat that floats like macabre decoration, and fills his jug anyway. Your turn arrives. You lower a borrowed clay pot into the water, watching ripples distort your reflection until you barely recognize the face, looking back, gaunt from just one day of historical immersion, eyes showing the fatalistic smirk of someone adapting to madness by embracing its internal logic. The water looks questionable at best, but denial is not an option in a world without indoor plumbing or corner convenience stores. Carrying water uphill taxes muscles you had previously used primarily for typing and occasional recreational sports. The full pot weighs more than expected, sloshing treacherously with each step. Your makeshift sandals, hastily purchased replacements for those surrendered as rent, slide unpredictably on surfaces slick with substances you prefer not to identify. You nearly topple when a pig darts between your legs, its owner chasing behind with creative Latin curses that would make scholars blush. Behind you, an elderly woman slips on the same treacherous patch. Her pot shatters against stone, water and ceramic shards exploding outward. No one stops to help. The loss represents more than inconvenience. Pottery was her week's wages transformed into functional necessity, now reduced to worthless fragments. She weeps soundlessly, the quiet dignity of her despair, more affecting than dramatic wailing would be. You walk faster, guilt nipping at your heels, like the street dogs that shadow anyone carrying potential food. Back at the apartment building, your temporary landlady waits by the entrance, hand already outstretched. Rent for another night is due in advance. You show empty hands, your final coins spent on replacement footwear. She eyes your new sandals, cheap but still worth something, in the perpetual calculation of survival economics, and gestures imperiously. Reluctantly you remove them, place them in her palm, feel the street's unforgiving stones bite your now bare soles. She nods, transaction closed. You're paid up for 1/3 of another night before you've even properly started the day. You leave your water jug with the family, a small contribution toward your corner rental, and wander the city barefoot, hunting work with increasing desperation. The streets feel different against unprotected feet, every texture amplified, every piece of debris a potential injury. You develop a shuffling gait designed to minimize skin contact with suspicious wet patches and sharp objects. An artisanal workshop catches your attention, the sound of hammering and the distinctive smell of mineral pigments drifting through its open front. Inside, craftsmen create mosaic tiles destined for wealthy homes and public buildings. The workshop master, a broad-shouldered man with pigment permanently embedded in the creases of his hands, evaluates your appearance with professional assessment. Can you grind consistently? He asks without preamble. Yes, you answer, hoping this isn't a specialized skill requiring training. Good. Pulverize this. He hands you a small sack of malachite chunks, gestures toward a mortar and pestle station. When it's fine enough to pass through this screen, you'll get paid. Not before. Hours vanish in the repetitive labor of grinding stone into powder. Your arms tremble with fatigue, unused to this particular motion, repeated hundreds of times. Green dust coats your fingernails, works its way into pores, finds your lungs despite attempts to breathe shallowly. By midday, your throat tastes of copper and pulverized stone, but the pile of usable pigment grows slowly on the worksheet. The shop master inspects your work, grunts what might be approval, and hands you payment, half a loaf of bread and a piece of cheese that's a quarter spoiled. You carefully cut away the molded section and eat the remainder with the desperate efficiency of genuine hunger. While you eat, a messenger runs through the streets, shouting news that ripples through the population. Nomakia tomorrow. Emperor's decree. Naval battle at the Stagnum Augusti. A staged sea battle in an artificial basin, one of Rome's most spectacular and resource-intensive entertainments. Thousands of slaves and prisoners will reenact historic naval conflicts for the pleasure of the population, fighting until one side achieves victories through the actual deaths of their opponents. You sense an opportunity. Large spectacles require massive support staff, including water carriers to weave through the stands, selling diluted wine to thirsty spectators. Such temporary employment requires no credentials beyond physical presence and basic dexterity. You finish your meager meal in 3 large bites and sprint toward the announced location, dodging carts and pedestrians with newfound agility born of urgency. The site buzzes with preparation. Temporary wooden stands rise around a massive artificial lake, slaves hammering planks with tireless rhythm. Water flows through temporary aqueduct extensions, gradually filling the basin that will soon become a theater of maritime death. Vendors secure prime selling positions through bribes to the overseer, while performers practice battle cries and dramatic death postures on dry land. You locate the hiring tent, ducking under its canvas flap with hope fluttering in your chest. Too late. The recruitment officer's stylus scratches through the final available position on his wax tablet. Just as you approach, you stand there panting, watching children quicker and more familiar with the process. Then you walk away with tokens that guarantee them work tomorrow. A cough sounds behind you. You turn to find a solidly built man in his 30s, body gleaming with oil that accentuates muscles developed through systematic training. A fresh scar crosses his left shoulder, still pink with recent healing. His eyes contain the peculiar combination of intensity and emptiness that comes from regular exposure to combat. "Need work?" he asks without preamble. "Yes." The ludus is short on practice. Opponents for sword drills. They pay in denarii, 1 per session. 2, if you last longer than most. He delivers this information without emotion, as if offering positions for library filing rather than human target practice. This can't possibly be safe. Your modern instincts scream, but your empty stomach and bare feet form a more persuasive counter-argument. You accept before sanity can fully veto the decision, following your new employer through streets that gradually transition from commercial spaces to an area dominated by training facilities. The ludus is simultaneously more organized and more brutal than you imagined. A central courtyard surrounded by cells and equipment rooms serves as the training ground, its sand reddish-brown from years of absorbed blood and sweat. Gladiators, some combat veterans, others novices, practice in pairs or small groups under the watchful eyes of trainers whose scarred bodies testify to their own arena experience. You're handed a wooden practice sword and a heavily dented shield, given approximately 30 seconds of instruction. Try to block, don't actually hit anyone, and shout when you're hit so they know to stop, then thrust into rotation. For the next 2 hours, you serve as mobile practice dummy for men whose professional skill involves efficiently dismembering opponents. They pull their strikes, mostly. When they don't, the resulting bruises bloom across your ribs and arms in real time, visible maps of your inadequacy as a fighter. You learn to anticipate certain attack patterns, developing a rudimentary defensive technique born of pure survival instinct. By the session's end, you're drenched in sweat, covered in sand stuck to blood from scraped elbows and knees, but still intact enough to collect payment. 3 denarii jingle in your hand. You lasted longer than expected, earning an extra coin as an encouragement to return tomorrow. The gladiator who recruited you nods with something approaching approval. Most new ones quit after 10 minutes. You're either brave or desperate. You don't clarify which assessment is correct, suspecting both apply in different proportions. You limp away from the ludus as afternoon slides toward evening, bruised but richer than you've been since arriving in this historical nightmare. Your first stop, a public bath to wash away the day's accumulation of sweat, blood, and pigment dust. You choose a modest establishment rather than one of the luxurious imperial complexes, paying the minimal entrance fee and checking your tunic with an attendant who barely glances up from his counting board. The bathing ritual, formalized through centuries of practice, begins in the tepidarium, a warm room designed to open pores gradually. You sit on a marble bench, letting heat seep into sore muscles, watching Romans of various social stations engage in the social commerce that makes bathhouses the networking centers of the ancient world. 2 merchants discuss a shipment of Spanish olive oil, their conversation shifting seamlessly between Latin and Greek as they calculate profit margins. The teacher drills his young student on Virgil's verses, the boy's recitation mechanical but accurate. 3 women gossip behind handheld fans, their laughter suggesting the topic is scandalously entertaining. You progress to the caldarium, where intense heat opens pores fully and induces therapeutic sweating. Here, slaves circulate with strigils, curved metal implements designed to scrape oil, sweat, and dirt from skin. Not having your own personal slave, you rent the services of a bath attendant who approaches your body with professional detachment, scraping accumulated Roman filth from your modern skin with brisk efficiency. The pile of grime that results from this procedure is alarmingly substantial for a single day's accumulation. The final stage, immersion in the frigidarium's cold plunge, shocks your system into tingling alertness. You emerge shivering but remarkably refreshed, having experienced the ancient world's version of a spa treatment. The entire process reinforces why Romans considered bathing essential to civilization. The contrast between pre-bath and post-bath existence is stark enough to justify their architectural devotion to cleanliness. Evening approaches. With coins still in hand, you make strategic purchases, a simple wool cloak for night warmth, sturdier sandals to replace those surrendered as rent, bread and dried fruit for immediate consumption, plus a small flask of watered wine safe to drink without risking waterborne illness. These practical investments consume most of your gladiatorial earnings, but transform your existence from purely reactive survival to something approaching planned living. You spend your second night in a different insula, renting space on the second floor from a widow who supplements her meager weaving income by maximizing occupancy in her 2-room apartment. The accommodations are marginally better than your previous lodging. The floor is swept, the pallet stuffed with fresh straw rather than reused bedding, and your fellow renters limited to 2 others rather than an entire family. You sleep deeply, despite occasional interruptions from street noise, your body surrendering to exhaustion, enhanced by the bath's therapeutic effects. Morning brings nervous energy to Rome's streets. The Naumachia represents special entertainment beyond the routine gladiatorial games or chariot races. It's an imperial spectacle designed to reinforce the emperor's magnificence through sheer scale and expenditure. Even slaves seem to move with greater purpose, their owners having granted limited holiday freedom to attend the event. You break your fast with bread and fruit purchased yesterday, supplemented by a cup of posca from a street vendor, the vinegar drink that serves as common refreshment for Rome's working class. Your muscles protest yesterday's gladiatorial training with eloquent stiffness, but mobility returns after brief stretching. The bruises have matured overnight into a colorful atlas of combat geography mapped across your torso. The streets fill as morning advances, human rivers converging toward the artificial lake where the spectacle will unfold. You join the flow, carried along by collective anticipation. Citizens from every social stratum mingle in rare proximity. Senators in toga praetexta, with purple borders, indicating their rank walk the same paths as laborers in simple tunics, their destinations identical, though their seating will reflect Rome's rigid social stratification. Temporary stands surrounding the Stagnum Augusti fill quickly, tens of thousands settling into place, hours before the actual event. You find space on a middle tier, positioned between the elite seats, cushioned with imported fabrics, and the upper standing room sections, where the poorest citizens will watch while baking under direct sun. Your neighbors on the bench include a minor government clerk, recognizable by his ink-stained fingers, and the calculating eyes of bureaucratic survival, and a prosperous blacksmith whose massive forearms bear the scars of his trade. First Naumachia. The blacksmith asks, noticing your wide-eyed assessment of the spectacle's scale. You nod, unwilling to reveal the true extent of your unfamiliarity. Emperor's spending a fortune on this one, he continues, clearly pleased to share insider knowledge. 6 actual triremes brought from the naval yards at Misenum, hundreds of prisoners collected specifically. They're recreating the Battle of Actium, Romans versus Egyptians. He pronounces Egyptians with the casual disdain of imperial citizens for conquered peoples, regardless of their ancient cultural achievements. Will they actually, you leave the question unfinished, die? Of course. He seems surprised you would even ask. That's the point. Otherwise it's just men splashing in boats. He laughs at the absurdity of bloodless entertainment, a sound echoed by the clerk on your other side. The hours of waiting pass in a complex social ritual of food sharing, gossip exchange, and collective people watching. Vendors weave through stands selling everything from dried fruits to commemorative clay figurines of naval warriors. Pickpockets work the crowd with professional dexterity, occasionally caught and subjected to immediate frontier justice by their victims. Trumpets silence the crowd. All eyes turn to the imperial box, where the emperor makes his entrance surrounded by Praetorian guards, whose armor gleams with obsessive polish. Even from your distance, you can see the fortune in gold, purple silk, and jewels adorning the living embodiment of Rome's power. He raises his hand in a gesture simultaneously, acknowledging the thunderous acclaim and commanding its cessation, the perfect physical expression of Roman authority's dual nature, popular and absolute. A herald's voice, trained to project across vast spaces, announces the day's entertainment with formal Latin cadences that roll across water with supernatural clarity. He details the historical battle being recreated, names the commanders who will lead each side, and emphasizes the emperor's boundless generosity in providing this spectacle at personal expense. The crowd roars approval at appropriate intervals, the sound physical enough to vibrate the wooden planks beneath you. Gates at opposite ends of the artificial lake grind open. Prisoners row triremes into view, oars moving with the precision of those who have been harshly trained over months specifically for this moment. The ships glisten with fresh paint, Roman vessels decorated with eagles and imperial symbols, Egyptian craft adorned with stylized crocodiles and lotus blossoms created by artists who have never seen Egypt but imagined it through cultural stereotypes. Shields line the gunwales, wooden practice weapons have been replaced with real bronze and iron implements of death, stage armor transformed into actual protection that will momentarily delay but not prevent fatal wounds. The crowd's roar intensifies as the vessels take position. These are not actors in a theatrical production, but actual condemned men, prisoners of war, criminals, captured pirates, debtors, unable to satisfy Roman justice through payment. They row under the supervision of experienced naval officers who will direct the combat according to choreography designed for maximum dramatic effect while ensuring the preordained outcome. Roman victory, as history dictates and imperial propaganda requires. Battle commences with a signal from the emperor. Oars bite water with synchronous power, vessels building momentum toward initial engagement. The sound changes from orderly rowing to chaotic combat as ships make contact, ramming impacts, splintering wood, men shouting in various languages, unified by the universal dialect of fear. Blood stains water with spreading crimson clouds, visible even from the stands. Some prisoners dive overboard, attempting to swim toward the basin's edge. Archers stationed at intervals ensure this form of escape remains theoretical rather than practical. A vessel drifts near your section of the stands, its captain killed early in the engagement, crew fighting without coordination against boarders from a Roman ship. One man floats face down near the vessel, morning sunlight illuminating his exposed back, where ownership brands tell the story of his journey through servitude. The current created by passing ships pulls him under, erasing his individual tragedy beneath the larger spectacle. Halfway through the battle, the matron seated behind you sprays rose water on her veil to mask the rising stench of blood and fear that carries across water with nauseating clarity. Droplets catch in your hair and eyelashes, mingling with sweat born of both heat and emotional distress. You realize your cheeks are wet too, but not from perfume or perspiration. You blink away salt water, hoping your neighbors attribute any visible emotion to excitement rather than the horror and pity that actually fills your modern conscience. The blacksmith notices your discomfort, but misinterprets its cause. First time can be overwhelming, he says, voice gentler than his appearance suggests. The scale of the emperor's power, seeing history come alive, it moves something in the soul. He offers you a swig from his wine flask, a gesture of camaraderie you accept, despite knowing it won't dull the actual source of your distress. When the last Egyptian's vessel is captured, its surviving crew kneels before the victorious Roman commander. The audience chants for mercy, a ritualized performance they have rehearsed at countless games, a choreographed plea containing no actual expectation that clemency will result. The emperor rises, extends his arm, turns his thumb in the gesture that has become historically iconic. Blade flashes in sunlight. Heads roll, some stopping at vessel's edge, with eyes open toward the stands, as if questioning the entertainment value of their actual deaths. Applause deafens, tens of thousands of hands creating a storm of approval that seems to ripple the water's surface. You stand, no longer able to maintain the pretense of enjoying the spectacle. The blacksmith looks surprised, but not offended by your departure. Too much sun? He asks, providing a socially acceptable excuse for your retreat. Yes, you manage, grateful for the face-saving explanation. Need shade? You navigate the crowded stands toward an exit, passing vendors doing brisk business as the spectacle concludes. Death apparently stimulates appetite and souvenir purchasing equally. The streets beyond feel strangely quiet after the arena's concentrated humanity, though quiet in Rome remains a relative concept limited by the constant background noise of empire's administrative center. Streets after the Naumachia swim with a peculiar mix of drunk elation and the subdued energy of those who have collectively witnessed death as entertainment. You drift through gathering evening shadows, feeling a century older than when you awoke this morning. 3 coins remain from your gladiatorial earnings, a small fortune compared to your initial destitution. You decide to invest in a proper meal rather than the subsistence snacking that has sustained you thus far. At a corner bakery, clay ovens glow like miniature suns, radiating heat that creates a force field of warmth extending several feet into the street. You buy a round loaf hot enough to scald palms, the crust crackling with promise as you break it open to release fragrant steam. At a neighboring stall, you select a wedge of goat cheese that, while strong-smelling, shows no visible signs of spoilage, a luxury by Roman standards. Finding a relatively clean step to sit on, you prepare to enjoy this simple feast with the focused appreciation that only genuine hunger can provide. A shadow breaks your solitude, a small figure standing just at the edge of your peripheral vision. You turn to find the boy from your first day in Rome, Tertius. He stares at your bread with naked longing, thin face expressing hunger's eloquence more effectively than any words could. Without conscious thought, you tear your loaf in half, offering the larger portion across the divide of centuries and circumstances that separate you. He hesitates only momentarily before accepting, small hands clutching the bread with desperate care. He devours it with the focused intensity of one who knows meals are never guaranteed, working methodically from edges to center to ensure not a crumb escapes consumption. When he finishes, he looks at you directly for the first time, eyes momentarily free of the wariness that normally clouds them. Onitrates, he says carefully, the formal Latin phrase clearly learned rather than naturally part of his street vocabulary. His smile transforms his face from generic urchin to specific child, a human being with his own story rather than a walking sociological statistic of urban poverty. Your throat tightens with unexpected emotion. In this simple exchange, bred for gratitude, momentary satiation for momentary connection, you find the first authentic human interaction since your arrival in ancient Rome. No economic calculation, no survival strategy, just the basic recognition of shared humanity across circumstances. What's your name? Tertius asks, emboldened by food and your demonstrated non-hostility. Marcus, you answer, selecting a name common enough to avoid attention, but specific enough to establish identity. Where's your family, Marcus? The question contains genuine curiosity. Lone adults without family connections are unusual in Rome's kinship-based social structure. Far away, you answer truthfully. He nods with the sage acceptance of one who has seen many variations of displacement. Mine too. Dead, or sold, or left. Can't remember which anymore. He delivers this tragic biography without self-pity, simply stating facts as he understands them. How do you survive? Do you ask, genuinely curious about the mechanics of childhood independence in this unforgiving urban environment? I run messages sometimes. Hold horses for men at the baths. Find things people drop. His euphemism for petty theft is delivered with a sly glance to gauge your reaction. Just until I'm big enough for the legions. 3 meals a day, and pay for killing barbarians. Better than starving here. 'Tis career aspirations. Military service as escape from urban poverty reflect a calculation made by countless young men throughout Roman history. The legions offered social mobility, steady income, and eventual retirement benefits for those who survived the decades of service. That this opportunity came at the price of years fighting Rome's wars on distant frontiers seemed reasonable exchange to those with few alternatives. You share the remainder of your cheese, watching Tertius savor each bite with methodical appreciation. When finished, he stands with the perpetual motion of street children who know remaining stationary too long invites trouble. I sleep near the cattle market, he offers, a piece of personal information that represents significant trust behind the counting office. If you need to find me. With that cryptic invitation to future interaction, he vanishes into gathering darkness, his small form dissolving into shadow as completely as if he'd never existed. For the first time since your arrival in ancient Rome, you feel something beyond survival panic and moral horror, a fragile connection to this alien world through one of its most vulnerable inhabitants. The empathy awakened by this brief encounter creates an unexpected warmth more sustaining than bread or shelter. This momentary peace shatters with the sudden wail of female voices from several streets away. The sound carries unmistakable terror, cutting through normal urban noise with the precision of genuine emergency. You rise instinctively, moving toward the commotion with the eternal human struggle between curiosity and self-preservation battling in your mind. Rounding a corner, you confront a scene of urban disaster, instantly recognizable across millennia. Fire, Flames lick rooftops of the Subura district's densely packed insulae, the inferno having already engulfed one building and now reaching hungrily toward its neighbors. Wind feeds the blaze, carrying embers that leap from structure to structure like malevolent fireflies seeking new hosts. People flood streets carrying whatever possessions they could grab in moments of panic decision-making: cooking pots, blankets, caged birds, family shrines, crying infants. Some clutch small coffers containing life savings, others drag elderly relatives, unable to move quickly enough independently. You scan the chaos instinctively for Tertius, realizing with sinking stomach that he mentioned sleeping near the cattle market, directly in the fire's projected path. Without conscious decision, you sprint toward the advancing flames, pushing against the human tide fleeing in the opposite direction. Heat slams you physically. As you draw closer, smoke clawing at your throat, and eyes with acrid fingers. The roar of the fire creates its own weather system, wind rushing toward the oxygen-hungry beast at the center of destruction. There's no sign of the boy in the immediate chaos. Sparks rain down like burning snowflakes, igniting anything sufficiently dry to catch. A roof collapses with thunderous finality, sending plumes of embers skyward in a perverse imitation of festival fireworks. The private fire brigade arrives, but true to Roman market economics, begins negotiating prices with panicked building owners while flames advance unchecked. The brigade leader calculates property values against suppression costs, maximizing profit while minimizing effort in a demonstration of disaster capitalism's ancient roots. You taste rage, metallic and hot as the fire itself. Without planning or forethought, you grab an abandoned bucket from a doorway, locate the nearest public fountain, still flowing, and join an impromptu human chain that has formed to combat the blaze. Hands pass, fill buckets toward the fire line, empty ones returning for refilling in a continuous circuit of desperate community action. Hours blur in smoke and exertion. Your hands blister from rough bucket handles, lungs burn from particulate inhalation, eyes stream continuously in protective response to irritation. Around you, strangers work with the focused coordination of those united by immediate crisis, social distinctions temporarily erased by common threat. A senator's slave passes buckets alongside a baker's apprentice. A prostitute works beside a priest's assistant, necessity creating alliances that would be unthinkable in normal circumstances. Eventually, the fire loses momentum, its appetite for destruction gradually satisfied by consumed buildings or thwarted by human intervention where defensive lines held. Dawn bleeds pale light over the charred skeletons of homes, illuminating the aftermath with merciless clarity. The human cost becomes visible in morning light. Bandage burns, smoke-blackened faces, expressions of stunned loss as survivors process the transition from having to not having that occurred in hours. Among the ashes littering what was once a small courtyard shared by multiple insulae, a small object catches your eye, a half-eaten loaf, its distinctive crust immediately recognizable as the exact bread you shared with Tertius. You kneel, touching the crust now hardened like primitive pottery by heat's alchemical transformation. It crumbles at your touch, reduced to carbon and memory. The dust goes upward, merging with omnipresent smoke, vanishing into the larger narrative of destruction. You search surrounding areas, meticulously, questioning survivors about a small boy who might have been near the cattle market offices. No one remembers seeing him specifically, one child among many in a district teeming with youth, but neither does anyone confirm the worst. Uncertainty offers thin hope in disaster's wake. Absence of proof is not proof of absence. You choose to believe he escaped, because the alternative is unthinkable after connecting with his humanity so recently. Exhaustion crashes upon you with physical force. As adrenaline ebbs, you find a fountain untouched by the conflagration, wash soot from face and arms with methodical movements that require little conscious thought, then sink onto a stone bench beneath a small shrine to neighborhood lares. Around you, Rome begins its resilient response to disaster. Merchants already selling food to the displaced. Landlords assessing damage with calculating eyes. Priests offering interpretations of divine messages conveyed through flame. The machinery of urban recovery operates with the efficiency of experience. Rome burns often enough that response has become ritualized. Silence follows the fire's aftermath, thick as wet wool draped over the district. Survivors sift through ruins, with expressions of stunned disbelief, gradually transforming to resigned acceptance. You stand barefoot on blackened earth, pores clogged with smoke, lungs coated in particulate despair, physically and emotionally exhausted from the night's battle against elemental destruction. Yet somehow a spark stubbornly endures in your chest, not hope exactly, something more resilient and less optimistic. Perhaps call it stubborn vitality, perhaps masochistic curiosity about what fresh hell tomorrow might bring. Rome isn't a city one survives through logical planning. Survival here requires refusing the statistical likelihood of disaster, pushing forward with irrational persistence against overwhelming evidence suggesting futility. Across the smoldering square, a column still stands amid destruction, inscribed with military victories, carved to outlive memory itself. You stare at the monument, veins of quartz in the marble catching morning light with indifferent beauty. Empire, carved in stone that appears permanent from human perspective, yet even stone erodes given sufficient time. A breeze stirs ash, tracing invisible patterns in air like ghostly calligraphy. You suddenly perceive centuries passing in accelerated vision, Goths and Vandals thundering through gates, plague carts collecting anonymous dead, marble pillaged for medieval cathedrals, Renaissance artists sketching ruins, tourists in floppy hats posing for photographs beside historical remnants. Rome will fall, rise, fall again, transform, endure in fragments and reinventions, but right now it lives in full imperial confidence, monstrous and magnificent simultaneously, and you are stitched into its particular historical moment, like a reluctant thread in an enormous tapestry, contemplating mortality or just resting. The voice breaks your reverie, cultured, educated Latin with the faintest trace of Greek accent. You turn to find Apollonius, the philosopher from the Forum, standing beside your bench with the patient expression of one accustomed to waiting for others to emerge from deep thought. Both, I suppose, you answer, too tired for pretense. He settles beside you uninvited, arranging his toga with the absent precision of long habit. Fire has a philosophical clarity that other disasters lack, he observes. It reduces complexity to elemental simplicity, revealing the impermanent nature of what we mistake for solid reality. You grunt non-committally, lacking energy for philosophical debate, but appreciating human companionship after the night's chaos. You fought the flames, he notes, observing your blistered hands and soot-stained tunic. Interesting choice for a visitor with no property at stake. The observation reminds you that Apollonius possesses uncomfortable perception beneath his philosophical exterior, seemed like the right thing to do. You offer simply, in tears of seemingly irrational altruism, in crisis reveal more about a person's essential character than calculated charity in calm times, he says, clearly framing your choice within some larger ethical framework he's developed. Tours would approve, though they might question your emotional investment in outcomes beyond your control. I was looking for someone, you admit, finding yourself wanting to explain actions that must appear peculiar to rational observation. A boy I'd met. He mentioned sleeping near here. Apollonius nods, absorbing this information without judgment. And did you find him? No. That uncertainty may be a gift from fortune, he suggests. To know nothing leaves room for hope. To know the worst closes possibility. You consider this perspective, uncertainty, as potential blessing rather than torment. There's comfort in the ancient philosopher's framing, though not enough to fully ease your concern for Tertius's fate. You continue to surprise me, Apollonius remarks, after a comfortable silence. Most visitors to Rome either embrace its excesses without question, or reject its entirety from the safety of moral superiority. You seem to be attempting the more difficult path, engagement without surrender of principle. I'm just trying to survive until I can. You trail off, realizing you have no actual plan beyond daily existence. How does one leave ancient Rome when one never intentionally arrived, until you can return home? Apollonius completes your thought with uncomfortable accuracy. Interesting that you consider elsewhere home, rather than adapting to your present circumstances. Rome doesn't exactly make adaptation easy, you observe dryly, gesturing toward the fire's aftermath surrounding you. Apollonius laughs, the sound startlingly genuine amid destruction. No, she doesn't. Rome demands surrender, not accommodation. Those who thrive here don't adapt to Rome. They become Roman, embracing both the magnificence and monstrosity, without division. I'm not sure I can do that, you admit. Nor should you, necessarily. He responds with surprising agreement. Surrender of identity is spiritual death, regardless of physical survival. The challenge is maintaining your essential self while existing within systems designed to eliminate individuality that contradicts collective purpose. His articulation of your exact dilemma, how to survive physically without sacrificing your core moral identity, strikes with unexpected precision. Does everyone have philosophical conversations amid disaster, or am I specially honored? You ask, deflecting with humor. Crisis clarifies thought. Apollonius replies simply, removed from comforting illusions of stability, minds either retreat to superstition or advance toward insight. I prefer seeking companions, oriented toward the latter. He rises, brushing ash from his toga with fastidious attention. Walk with me. Standing still too long in Rome invites either thieves or tax collectors, and I'm not certain which are more depleting. You follow, finding renewed energy in purposeful movement and intellectual engagement after emotional drainage. Apollonius leads through back streets, apparently selected for minimal human traffic, maintaining a running commentary that blends practical observation with philosophical digression. He points out architectural features, revealing class distinctions, invisible to untrained eyes, explains political graffiti's coded messaging, identifies which shops serve as fronts for less reputable enterprises. His Rome exists beneath the surface of obvious monuments and public spectacles, a city of subtle connections and hidden meanings accessible only through local knowledge and careful observation. You eventually reach a small courtyard garden hidden behind high walls, accessible through an unmarked wooden door that Apollonius opens with a key produced from his toga folds. Inside, surprising tranquility awaits. Carefully tended plants surround a small fountain whose gentle splashing creates acoustic privacy. Stone benches positioned for conversation suggest regular gathering of select individuals. My patron's urban retreat, Apollonius explains. He permits philosophical discussions here twice weekly, provided our conclusions don't threaten his senatorial ambitions. His ironic tone suggests complex relationship with whoever funds his intellectual pursuits. A slave appears silently, bearing a tray with bread, olives, watered wine, and small honey cakes. Apollonius gestures you toward food with casual generosity. Eat. Philosophical insight requires physical sustenance. The simple meal tastes extraordinary after your night of smoke, inhalation, and physical exertion. You consume with grateful appreciation, while Apollonius observes with the detached interest of one who studies human behavior as ongoing research. You mentioned looking for a boy, he says when your initial hunger subsides. What was his name? Tertius. Common designation for a third son, he notes. Description. You provide details, approximate age, distinguishing features, location where you met him. Apollonius listens attentively, expression neutral. I know people who know street children, he offers. Finally, they survive through complex networks, invisible to authorities. I'll inquire discreetly whether this Tertius was among fire casualties or has relocated to another district. The unexpected offer of practical assistance from someone you classified as purely theoretical thinker surprises and touches you. Thank you. You respond simply, finding elaborate expression inadequate. Philosophy, without application to human needs, is mere intellectual vanity, Apollonius states, as if justifying his practical offer within his philosophical framework. Now, shall we discuss your larger dilemma while we digest, specifically, how one maintains ethical integrity within systems designed to reward its compromise? The conversation that follows ranges across ethical frameworks, spanning cultures and centuries, some familiar from your modern education, others unique to ancient worldviews. Apollonius proves both challenging interlocutor and patient teacher, never condescending but refusing to accept imprecise reasoning or convenient conclusions. Hours pass unmarked by urgency, the garden's tranquility creating temporary asylum from Rome's relentless assault on senses and morality. When late afternoon shadows lengthen across the courtyard, Apollonius concludes with practical advice disguised as philosophical observation. Remember that immediate survival sometimes requires actions your ideal self would reject, while maintaining core principles often demands sacrificing immediate advantage. The wisdom lies not in choosing between them, but in recognizing which circumstance requires which response. You leave the garden intellectually stimulated and unexpectedly hopeful, not because your circumstances have improved, but because human connection, across vast differences, has momentarily bridged the alienation of your displacement. Apollonius's parting words follow you into Rome's chaotic streets. Return in 3 days. I may have information about your young friend by then, and perhaps insights about returning to where you belong. The cryptic reference to where you belong leaves you wondering exactly how much the philosopher has intuited about your true origins. His perceptiveness suggests he recognizes your fundamental otherness without requiring explicit explanation of your temporal displacement. The sun slides toward the Janiculum hill, shadows stretching like predatory fingers across forums and markets. Another Roman day concludes, bringing the uncertainty of night with its particular dangers and requirements. You have shelter tonight. The coins from gladiatorial practice secure another corner in another insula, this time in a quieter district far from the fire's aftermath. With temporary lodging arranged, you permit yourself to explore Rome with less immediate survival pressure. The Campus Martius draws your attention, once Rome's military training ground, now developed into a complex of public buildings, temples, and recreational spaces along the Tiber's bend. Here Romans of various classes mingle in relative equality, united by appreciation for physical culture and civic amenities provided by emperors and senators, competing for popular approval through architectural philanthropy. Young men exercise naked, in the tradition of Greek athletics, wrestling, and running under the critical eyes of retired soldiers who offer technical critique with military precision. Public baths with elaborate facades promise hygienic luxury within their marble interiors. Temples to imported deities stand alongside shrines to traditional Roman gods, religious syncretism manifested in architectural proximity that would horrify theological purists. You observe a game of harpastum, ancestor of rugby and football, played with fierce competitive intensity by teams composed of social equals and clients of the same patron. The hard-stuffed leather ball flies between players who employ tactics ranging from skillful passing to outright tackling that would earn penalties in modern sports. Spectators cheer with enthusiasm equal to that displayed at gladiatorial contests, though the stakes involve pride rather than survival. A food vendor circulates through the crowd, selling chickpea fritters still sizzling from his portable brazier. The savory aroma reminds you of falafel from your own time. Some culinary traditions apparently transcend historical periods with remarkable consistency. You purchase one with your dwindling funds, savoring the familiar flavor that creates momentary connection between past and future. As twilight deepens, the nature of campus activities shifts subtly. Families with children depart for home, replaced by adults seeking evening entertainment. Torches appear, illuminating selected paths, while leaving others in shadow according to commercial or security priorities. Musicians set up near popular wine shops, their instruments, lyres, aulos, flutes, small drums, creating musical backdrop for social congregation. You drift toward a group gathered around a storyteller whose animated performance suggests theatrical training. His narrative, delivered in colloquial Latin, punctuated by character voices and physical comedy, recounts Odysseus's encounter with the Cyclops. The audience responds with appropriate gasps, laughter, and appreciative comments that suggest most know the story's outcome, but enjoy the performative journey. You join their circle, finding universal pleasure in collective storytelling that bridges the centuries separating you from these temporary companions. The performer concludes with dramatic flourish, passing a small wooden bowl through appreciative listeners. Coins clink against wood, modest individual contributions that collectively provide living wage for cultural entertainment. You contribute your smallest coin, balancing appreciation against practical budget constraints. Night deepens over Rome. The city's nightlife continues with distinctive character, different from daytime commerce. Wine shops overflow with patrons, ranging from laborers drinking rough vintage to affluent young men starting evenings that will conclude with more questionable entertainment elsewhere. Courtesans distinguish themselves from common prostitutes through cultivated conversation and artistic talents displayed in establishment doorways. Professional gamblers set up dice games in tavern corners, their seemingly casual manner disguising mathematical calculation and psychological assessment of potential marks. You navigate this nocturnal landscape with growing confidence, having learned which streets to avoid, how to project purposeful determination that discourages casual predators, when to make brief eye contact, and when to stare exclusively forward. Rome teaches its survival lessons painfully but effectively. At a small shrine near your temporary lodging, you pause to observe a young mother lighting an oil lamp before a carved representation of Juno Lucina, goddess of childbirth. Her advanced pregnancy explains the religious devotion. Her worried expression suggests the universal maternal anxiety that transcends historical periods. The flame illuminates her face from below, creating chiaroscuro effect that emphasizes both youth and premature aging common to women in societies without reproductive health care. She notices your observation, misinterprets it as religious interest rather than anthropological curiosity. When Noban's first child, she explains simply, protective hand covering her swollen abdomen. The midwife says, "It sits wrongly. I bring offerings daily." Her matter-of-fact acceptance of mortality risk strikes you as both tragic and admirable, courage born of unavoidable circumstance rather than chosen heroism. "May Juno hear you," you respond, finding appropriately supportive formula despite theological agnosticism. The woman nods, thanks, completes her devotions, and departs into darkness, her solitary lamp creating bobbing firefly of light until street corner obscures her path. This brief interaction, mundane by Roman standards, extraordinary through your temporal perspective, crystallizes your evolving relationship with ancient Rome. Beyond spectacular monuments and historical events, documented in textbooks, exists the intimate, quotidian human experience of individuals navigating systems and circumstances beyond their control with whatever resources available. This young woman's pregnancy holds no historical significance by academic standards, yet represents the authentic fabric of Roman existence more genuinely than senatorial debates or imperial proclamations. You reach your rented corner, settle onto the straw pallet with modest expectations of comfort, and close your eyes on your third day in ancient Rome. Sleep arrives with surprising ease, your body adapting to historical conditions with the remarkable resilience of biological systems more flexible than intellectual frameworks. Dreams come fragmented but vivid, tertius, running through flame-lit streets, amphitheater crowds with modern faces wearing togas, lead pipes dissolving into toxic water that flows uphill toward future civilizations. You wake, periodically, disoriented by unfamiliar sounds, a dogfight in the street below, neighbors arguing through thin walls, the watchman calling hours in sing-song Latin that penetrates sleep without disrupting it completely. Morning arrives with roosters competing across neighborhoods, their biological alarm systems more reliable than mechanical alternatives, still centuries from invention. You wake fully, body stiff, from minimal padding between bone and floor, but remarkably functional given circumstances. 3 days in ancient Rome have already recalibrated your physical expectations and sensory tolerances. Yesterday's overwhelming stench now registers as merely unpleasant, ambient noise levels that initially seemed unbearable have become navigable background. Constant proximity to strangers feels increasingly normal rather than invasive. This adaptation simultaneously encourages and disturbs you. While physical acclimatization improves daily functioning, it signals potential erosion of the moral and aesthetic standards that define your modern identity. How long before public executions seem unremarkable entertainment? How many meals shared with starving children would it take before walking past them creates no emotional response? At what point does adaptation become surrender to moral frameworks you fundamentally reject? Apollonius's parting wisdom echoes, distinguishing between necessary compromise for survival and fundamental preservation of core principles remains your central challenge in navigating ancient Rome, not merely physically surviving, but maintaining the essential self that makes survival meaningful. With this philosophical framework, renewing your sense of purpose, you step into your fourth Roman day with something approaching determination. The empire remains indifferent to your individual journey, but perhaps that indifference creates space for defining your own relationship with this alien yet familiar world, until circumstances reveal path forward or backward to where you ultimately belong. The sun lifts higher over Rome's 7 hills, burning away morning mist that temporarily softened the city's edges. Your future here narrows to a knife's edge of possibilities, lead poisoning accumulating with each sip of water, plague incubating in communal baths, riot erupting from grain shortage or factional dispute, fire consuming another district, or simply a dagger finding your ribs in some backstreet misunderstanding. Statistical likelihood suggests you won't survive another week in the empire's capital. Yet against these odds, you square your shoulders, step into the flowing current of humanity that defines street life, and feel Rome swallow you anew, not as tourist or temporary visitor, but as participant in its grand, terrible experiment in civilization. The city remains unaware that you're already committing it to memory, cataloging details never recorded in official histories, experiencing textures and sensations lost to academic reconstruction. You walk barefoot, despite recently purchased sandals, deliberately feeling each stone through sensitive soles, as tangible connection to a world that exists now but will become only fragmentary artifacts. Each breath, though tainted with smoke and waste and unwashed humanity, fills your lungs with air molecules that might once have been exhaled by Julius Caesar or inhaled by ancestors who never imagined their distant descendant would walk these same streets. Your senses absorb Rome with renewed intensity, not merely surviving it, but witnessing it, committing its reality to memory, as testimony for a future that will romanticize or demonize, but rarely understand its complicated totality. The weight of food in your hand, the sound of Latin spoken casually rather than academically, the precise angle of shadow cast by tenement blocks designed by long-forgotten architects, the social choreography of status performed through subtle gestures at street crossings. These details will never appear in history texts, but constitute the authentic texture of Roman existence. Survival, you realize, is not about living forever in this precarious past where each day presents mortal hazards beyond modern comprehension. It's about breathing one more rancid breath than expected, experiencing one more ordinary interchange between time-bound humans, observing one more mundane miracle of civilization functioning despite its contradictions, and somehow translating that experience into meaning that transcends your individual journey. So you walk, barefoot, bruised, blistered, sleepless, but completely awake, to a world simultaneously alien and recognizable, terrible and wonderful, doomed and eternal. Rome continues its indifferent existence around you, but in your conscious witnessing, something crystallizes that will echo forward through centuries, the lived experience of ordinary moments that constitute history's unrecorded reality, testifying through your presence that real people inhabited these ruins before they became ruins, loved and feared and hoped before becoming abstractions in textbooks, and created meaning from the same raw materials of existence that humans will always share, regardless of when or where they draw breath in the vast unfolding of time. And perhaps that testimony, that bearing witness across centuries, is purpose enough for however many days remain in your unexpected journey through empire's beating heart.